Welcome to Tell Me Exactly. I'm your host, Meridith Jensen. Today, we're going to be talking about the emergency mental health dispatch training and the caller in crisis protocol. Joining me today are a couple of special guests, Jim Marshall and Darren Judd. Jim, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Okay, Meredith. Well, I'm CEO of the 911 Training Institute. I'm a licensed mental health professional in the state of Michigan. And my background is as a clinical person doing treatment and assessments for folks with trauma and complex relationship issues. That parlayed into serving our first responders, our very first responders, 911 professionals over the years as an educator and as an advocate in the industry, helping establish national standards. And so the 911 Training Institute is dedicated to providing our now professionals with competence, core competency in protecting, empowering themselves to assure their well-being and prevention of PTSD, suicide, as well as empowering them to take the very best care of our callers that they can. And that means integrating psychology and the best of 911 on the calls, and thus Protocol 41 and EMHD.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jim. I can't wait to hear all you have to say about this important topic. Also joining me is Darren Judd. Say hi, Darren.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Meredith. So I'm Darren Judd. I'm with Priority Dispatch. I am one of the protocol experts on the implementations team. So part of my responsibilities is assisting in creating some of these auxiliary or these specialty protocols. And I actually had the privilege of working on this one right hand in hand with Jim Marshall and his crew.
What an honor. I'm so happy to have both of you here to talk about this. So let's get right to it. Jim, tell me exactly all about the emergency mental health dispatch training.
It comes down to this, Meredith. It's that I learned to listen to dispatchers a long time ago because they have something to say, right? It's like we joke about how opinionated they have to be and have to be able to be assertive and be able to manage those calls very, very well. And so as I began training in the 911 industry, because as many know, my sister Debbie was a leader in Michigan, helped establish the first academy for dispatchers in the state of Michigan. She had engaged folks to deliver training in resilience. Back then we called it stress management. And the members of her classes were not happy, neither was she. And so she said, look, you've been living this life in the trenches doing trauma therapy and helping people with mental illness, and you know about stress. Please, teach our dispatchers how to manage their own distress. And the bottom line is, I at first I didn't feel that would be right because I haven't sat the console. I didn't want to be Mr. Psychobabble woohoo coming in acting like I know a bunch of stuff. But my sister knew what she was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I agreed, and we built together our first course, which is still very alive and well, Survive and Thrive. It's a resilience course, and really a core of both our curriculums, both the call mastery curriculum and the resilience curriculum. But what happened was dispatchers in our courses began to say, Jim, what we need is help relating to these callers with mental illness. In the interim, I had built also a course on building life bridges to suicide callers, still going and still strong. All these have evolved over the years. But they said, in addition to what you're teaching us about how to relate to callers struggling with suicide, we need a lot more awareness, insight, a sense, get a feel for how to relate to people with all kinds of mental struggles. Could you create a class on that? And of course, I said, well, yes, because they wanted it. And what was interesting, Meredith, is at first they said, this needs to be a 2-day class. And then they said it needs to be a 3-day class. So I built a 1-day, a 2-day, a 3-day. Well, that evolved into an entire model, a conceptual framework for non-professionals at the console to be able to sit down with callers and instead of feeling like they don't get it, they don't understand where they're coming from, instead of trying to use repetitive persistence only like a hammer to build a whole house, instead of feeling anxiety because they don't feel equipped and competent to relate to these callers, instead of them carrying clinical responsibility by default because they're the person hearing the person in their greatest moments of need and they're not qualified as clinicians, they need to be equipped as now pros for the tasking of now pros to relate to callers struggling with mental crises. So this evolved into a model we call emergency mental health dispatching today. And that is the curriculum that we've been teaching at the 911 Training Institute for a number of years. We've trained many folks from agencies in this model. And at a certain point, when I was building out a protocol, at that time was limited to suicide, I realized that it had to also rule out other things like self-injurious behavior, possibly domestic violence, etc. I did not want to release this protocol into the industry on my own independently. I really believe that the Academy's protocols are the gold standard of care for people with medical emergencies, as well as protocols for the other types of emergencies. And so I reached out to Ivan Whitaker, who was then with the Academies, who I'm sure you know, Meredith. And that resulted in us joining together with Dr. Clausen, Brett Patterson, and others, and ending into working into a partnership where the LifeBridge protocol, while it still exists for non-priority, non-pro QA customers, could be a part of the protocol suite for pro QA. And then, of course, then that necessitated building out more training.
Right. And this is such a serious topic on the minds of everyone, of course, in the industry. I mean, I travel around to agencies all over the planet, and this is one of the most common comments that I get from dispatchers is the fear of these types of calls. The fear because they feel ill-equipped. They tell me all the time, dispatchers do, that they are scared to take these types of calls because they really just don't know what to say. They don't want to make it worse. They want to have empathy. They want to make sure that they help, but they just feel completely ill-equipped to be able to do that. And so I love to hear that we are, evolving a solution for that, because, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when that these calls are coming in. Every dispatcher that sits the chair today and in the past has taken some type of call with a caller in crisis that has just, needed that guidance and support.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, to your point here, we know from resilience research and resilience from the science of traumatology, which is a subspecialty of psychology, that it's not necessarily the stresses we experience that results in negative impacts for us psychophysiologically in our bodies and in our minds. It's how prepared we feel to handle those. And what we found in a preliminary study that the academies joined the Alina EMS from St. Paul and in the Institute in conducting was that when dispatchers felt better equipped with the EMHD training, that was a 3-day course, and with the LifeBridge's version of the protocol, which was not even near at the level that this is at now as Protocol 41, they had decreases in anxiety and increases in confidence and a sense of increased effectiveness across 4 different measures. To me, Meredith, not to sound like I don't, it almost sounds religious, but I really believe there's an ethical imperative that we not only task people with enormous responsibility, but we equip them to handle it on par with the demand. The resources must meet or exceed the demand. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, because they have protocols in place to handle every other type of emergency, whether, it's a fire or a childbirth or a CPR call. They've got instructions and support right there in front of them to handle those types of emergencies. These types of calls are so dynamic that I can only imagine the process of creation for this must have been just massive. So talk to me a little bit about how this Protocol 41, Caller in Crisis, was created and how it evolved over the years.
Well, I can do the first part, maybe welcome Darren to jump into the second part of this, because, I developed the first draft of the protocol in 2007, I believe. 2009, I don't know if Brett Patterson will remember this, but I actually sent it to him. We ended up on a phone call, and I just said, look, I really respect the academies and their whole history and success in building protocols. What do you think? And Brett said, wow, you know what? This picks right up where Protocol 25 leaves off. And then it was, 2009, now 2017. I'd been using our version of the protocol, evolving it over the years. But it wasn't until 2017 when I was fortunate that we began working together with the academies. And then I had always had dispatchers and mental health professionals involved in the shaping and evolution of the protocol. But now to bring Darren Judd in with his expertise, with the academies and his protocol expertise, Brett Patterson, so many others have had their hands on this. Field responders represented within the academies as well as beyond. I think about the folks, Jim Lake's team from Charleston County, South Carolina, having them involved. A lot of people have helped shape what it is today. Darren, how would you respond to that in terms of what the evolution of the protocol is?
Yeah, Darren, take us back to those early days and tell us what it was like from your perspective.
So I will tell you, when we first started, when I first got introduced to Jim and the group that was working on this protocol, and we started working and putting this together, it was very interesting and it was very intriguing because there was so many aspects, so many different things that we were taking into consideration. And we joke about it now, but we would meet on a monthly basis. And sometimes it would take us 3 or 4 months to decide how to word one question. And we might decide that wording on the question, then come back the next month and say, oh no, we've changed our mind. We've got to change it again, right? Or later on. Because this is one of those protocols where it's got to be right. We've got to make sure we're asking the question in the right manner. We've got to make sure we're involving that caller. And so we had to come up with a whole new thought process, because in our regular protocols, we're basically telling the caller to do something. With this protocol, we're bringing that caller into the call with us and asking them to work with us and work with us on these questions.
Right.
And so it was a whole new concept for us. And so writing the questions and determining what questions were going to be needed for not just the caller safety, the responder safety, for everyone involved in this, and deciding which callers can we potentially send off to a mental health crisis line or send alternate responses to. It took us 7 years basically to do that or more to get it completed, but we feel like we've done a good job with the version 1.
Right. And so then was this thing tested? Was it based on research, science? Where did it all come from? Like who decided ultimately for the script and the protocol itself to become what we see today?
So that came from Jim's team. We had the other clinicians. We had dispatchers on the group. We had staff like Brett Patterson, Dr. Clausen actually got involved. Brian Dale got involved towards the end, because we wanted to make sure the questions were right and we wanted to make sure they were worded correctly.
Yeah, and also to this question, Meredith, we had to bring what we know from the science of suicidology.
Right.
So it can't be arbitrary. I think that's what you were wondering about. Like,
exactly.
No, nothing can be constructed arbitrarily. Because here's what we know. In the history of the training of 911 professionals to manage these calls, which we call emergency mental health dispatch calls, right? How were they trained? How were you trained?
By just doing it, right? Over the years, you just learn to kind of talk to people. I mean, for me personally, I have taken these types of calls without this protocol and without this training. And I can remember being on the phone with that person, and all I could focus on was, you've got to build a rapport with this person. You've got to, build a relationship so that they trust you and that they know that you're here to help them, and do everything that you can to just, put as much empathy through that phone line as you can.
Yeah. Now, and to that point, here's a premise, and from all the way from the beginning in my work, before even in the academies got involved, and really been incredibly honored and advanced by all the members of the academy, from Dr. Clausen and everyone else. And that is, the premise is that our dispatchers have always exerted themselves and done a tremendous job, tried really, really well, really hard to do their best on these calls. It's just that we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes what we try to do in earnest is not correct, because there is a right and a wrong. Just even asking, are you thinking of killing yourself, instead of, are you thinking of hurting or harming yourself? You got to be direct, not indirect. Why? Because the science shows us, we've got data that shows us how to most effectively do these things. And then to your point about this is, I really need to emphasize this point. We actually wanted to honor a principle that I've taught to our telecommunicators for years, and that is we never want to make your job more difficult at the console. We don't want to add more tools and requirements and standards that make your life more difficult. We're trying to make it easier. Not that these calls will be easy, but what we provide in the protocol are multiple pathways that you can follow and a mental states menu, a guide for how to relate to the caller's most difficult mental states, which can
Right.
interfere with cooperation. Now we're moving the dispatcher from feeling a struggle with competence, a struggle with what do I do now, to empowerment. And that's what this is about.
And if I can add on to that real quick, Meredith, because Jim's correct on all of that, but we also, when we were creating this protocol, we had to be able to turn a non-suicidal or suicide ideation call that we were taking. If it turned bad, we had to be able to deal with that at an instant. We couldn't be going back and changing a bunch of key questions to get to where we needed to be. We needed to be able to deal with the situation at hand right immediately. So,
of course. Yeah.
That's right.
So as someone who has, a person that struggles with mental health in my immediate family, I'm just wondering, I'm curious, have you had any kind of cooperation from anyone that struggles with mental health to put them through this and just say, is this going to work?
Yeah. Yes. Darren, I say this, but we have to hold confidences on this as well. But I can tell you that among those who have tested and sought to break this protocol are those who have lived experience in crisis, their own crisis. And what they basically said is, if this had existed when I was going through my struggles, my outcomes may have been different. I may have suffered less. This is not a direct quote, and I wouldn't offer a direct quote, but absolutely.
Yeah.
This was designed with input from and with ultimate sensitivity to the end user, which is, not only the dispatcher, but that citizen.
Right. And that's amazing to hear, right? Because that speaks to the credibility of this and the actual, as we've talked about, the science, the research, we talk about how all of the science shows that you have to be direct, that, kind of tiptoeing around different subjects does not help the person that's seeking help. It's important to be direct in your communication with these callers so that you can create that team to get them the best help that they need in that moment.
And that's very true, because that is one of the biggest things that a lot of the comm centers bring up to me right now is when we start talking about this protocol, key question number one, are you thinking about killing yourself? I get this, that's kind of harsh. Are you sure that's how we should be asking that? And it's like, yes, bring the call to life, make it real.
One of the byproducts of this protocol that I hope helps in our industry is breaking down some of the stigma with mental health, right? I really hope to see that once this really gets some wheels under it and we are using it all the time, I hope that it really starts to kind of break down some of that stigma.
Well, and yes, and part of the anxiety of, I don't want to say the wrong thing, I don't want to tip them over the edge. What they need to know is this has been designed with input from leading suicidologists and people who do this for a living. I've had thousands of hours in the trenches with people struggling with suicide. I know what works and what doesn't work, but we also had to rely on the greater science beyond my lived experience as a clinician. And when it's night and day when the telecommunicator is able to convey confidence in the questions they ask and be freed up. This is a major point we need to emphasize, to be freed up to be themselves with the caller. The protocol doesn't restrict them from being themselves. It creates a pathway there by the training and by the way the protocol is designed. They can step in and out of the protocol at will. If the caller is struggling with oppositionalism because they're afraid, the dispatcher is able to say, wow, we can hold up for a second. It sounds like you're really struggling to tell me where the weapon is. You know what? That can be tough. Tell me what's going on that makes it hard for you to let me know that. And we're having now, the thing is, ultimately, we're not trying to make calls any longer than they have to be. But sometimes they're prolonged because we don't know what to do, and the
Right.
person's hanging up or they're not talking. In this case, it may take a few seconds longer, but what you end up with is true collaboration, where the caller feels like you get it. You're a stranger, and I'm debating whether to end my life. This
Yeah.
kind of sensitivity empowers everybody.
It's building that relationship. It's building the relationship with the caller. Yes. I had stepping in and out of the protocol with use of that emotional control tool. The management of those callers is essential. And, I'll stress it again. A lot of people, when I've been out, they're like, well, these questions are so much different than what we're used to doing in protocol. And it's like, you're right. We're working with the caller. We're not instructing them.
Right.
And I'm with you guys when I've been meeting with these centers, and they're like, oh, this tool is so amazing, just the helpful hints to be able to calm this caller down. And then when Jim was talking about being able to go in and out of the call, you know what? After we get to our send point, we have those jurisdictionally approved questions, right?
Right.
Those are set to gain useful information for the responders and the safety and everything there. But they're also to provide those call takers with conversation pieces. Let's talk about it.
Meaningful conversations. I love it.
Yes.
So let's talk about the emergency mental health dispatch training that's a part of this protocol being implemented in your centers. I can tell you that I've completed the self-paced training for the Protocol 41 caller in crisis, and it just completely blew me away. Again, as someone who has a personal life experience with this kind of thing, I it almost brought me to tears at points, to be honest, because I can remember just so many light bulb moments going off, and so many during the training, just thinking, man, my only regret about this training is that I didn't have it in my hands sooner, that I haven't had this, this type of support and this type of tool in my toolbox for the last 20 years. So let's talk about it. Tell me more about the training, what it is and what it looks like.
Well, first we need to give huge credit to Andrew and Raven from your shop in developing really the skeletal process. We met and we co-designed kind of what is the content, but they gathered all of it. They sat through my courses now in Training Institute courses and on emergency mental health dispatching, and then they really gleaned a huge amount of the content and then created this incredible flow of outline. I remember meeting with them and Dr. Clausen, and it was all right there. And I thought, oh my gosh, and they're going to try to accomplish this in 4 hours. and Doc said, just wait and watch, because I was blown away myself by what they could do. And so they ended up constructing this training. Then we worked together, to really tweak and optimize. But it is such an interactive training. It's not death by PowerPoint. And by the way, it's not a talking head training. I'm only on there maybe 8 total minutes, as you remember, talking. They've, original illustrations, incredibly interactive activities. Which mental state is evidenced right here? What does it sound like? Drawing connections literally with the mouse from one to the other, keeping the student engaged, and respecting the model of emergency mental health dispatching. Because if it were only, okay, look, all you need is a protocol. Just go ahead and use this protocol. Now we'll all be fine with these callers, as they call, struggling with suicidality, self-injurious behavior, risks of domestic violence, homicide. We're ruling out all those things. No, the minimal training to be able to use this protocol ethically and with any competence is those 4 hours of training. And that's what that first asynchronous training developed by ProQA with collaboration with the Institute achieves, is a minimal equipping, minimal competence. What I've noticed is I've met with, along with the academies, with other groups or states exploring in this use of this protocol, is that one of their questions now is, okay, that's great, you have the 4-hour training, but where's the rest of the continuing education?
Yeah, give us more. Give us more.
Right.
That's what we're hearing constantly, is this is a wonderful introduction and good to get us jumping off point, but give us more. Where's the rest?
But with that being said, the 4 sections that they broke it up to, I think, have been amazing. And I think we need to cover those 4 different titles, right? Because the very first one that they break it into, because it's like 4 1-hour sections, right? Sessions. Caller and Crisis Essentials. To me, that's a great lead into using this protocol. That's where they learn the foundational skills for understanding and speaking to those callers, right? Struggling.
And they also learn how to kind of categorize them into a couple of different types of mental health crisis caller, right? So it's
they
not
do,
just,
yes.
Right.
Without diagnosing, right?
Just helping us to kind of understand, is this person, suicidal, or is there some other mental health crisis happening?
Right, because the protocol has the 4 different pathways, potential pathways, right? This is what's helping them decide that, right?
Right.
And then there's the section that teaches about the mental states menu or the emotional control tool, when and how to use that, right? Involving that. And then there's the training session on Protocol 41, where it's actual ProQA type training within the module. And I love the last one is the boosting their resilience, where it helps the EMDs develop strategies to maintain their own mental health. I think that's just as important.
Mental health. Yeah. Oh, that's
just
huge.
as important, right?
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, Darren, because when they're asking for additional training, so the model of emergency mental health dispatching, from the get-go and at its core integrates empowerment and protection of the 911 professionals' mental health and their resilience in real time, using real-time skills, and their long-term well-being with intervention skills, strategies, and mindset relating to the caller. So we recognize that you can't just tell dispatchers, do this, and all work out. No, what happens when you're afraid, when you're distressed while you're helping with a caller? Well, you can lose 50 IQ points in a second, and you're draining your own energy, your resilience battery. So the training, we've really integrated how to keep your own resilience going, your battery charge, while you're on the calls and after them as well. And then that moves us into, the rest of the curriculum at the Training Institute, which people can access beyond. They have to take the 4-hour training, but then they can access our 911TI curriculum.
All right. So, Jim, you spoke about the fact that there is more training available because our agencies, have this introduction to the caller in crisis protocol, but where's the rest and where's more training? Because we know that our agencies and our clients and our dispatchers want that. So tell me a little bit more about what else you have to offer for a more extended emergency mental health dispatch training.
Right. So once people complete the 4-hour training through the academies, then they can go to the 911 Training Institute, and we have a full curriculum of EMHD courses. And we want to recognize this and very much respect that many of our centers are understaffed. Scheduling is extremely difficult. People are tired with a capital T. And so they can only do what they can do in real time right now. That is why we have a variety of options. So we have a 1-day Foundations of Emergency Mental Health Dispatching, which goes beyond and more specifically into the mental illnesses, understanding more beyond the 4-hour training. We have a 1-day Building Life Bridges to Suicide Callers, which goes into the fascinating suicidology and really understanding these behaviors, what's going on for people such that they struggle. We can go into far more depth than we can in the 4-hour training. And then we have our flagship course, which is for EMHD, which is EMHD plus Life Bridges. We bring together the content of the Foundations course and the Life Bridges Suicide Caller courses and go far more in depth, including scenario enactments so that they can practice these. And in the versions of these for Academy users, that will be flowing nicely and integrated with Protocol 41. In addition to these courses, the Institute has already built, we have not launched yet, our first 20 artificial intelligence call simulations specifically related to helping callers in mental crises. So we have 10 basic simulations and 20 more advanced simulations. So we can talk more about that at another time as well. But there's a lot there, and there will be more coming as well. We also are going to be building an asynchronous course which will be approximately 6 hours in length. On specifically on building light bridge to suicide callers. This will not be a replication of the 4-hour course. It'll be an asynchronous version of the one-day light bridges course for those who can't get their people into a live class.
Right.
We also provide all these classes online through Zoom. They're super interactive, as well as it's not just talking head or death by PowerPoint.
Yeah, and that's super important in today's environment with, staffing being such a challenge in every 911 center. So these are all available through the 911 Training Institute, and be sure to check out our show links. We will make sure to put that in the show notes, the links for how to access those other training opportunities. Darren, so talking about how this was created and how it's evolved into its current state, and we know that, of course, its current state will not be where it lives forever. It will continue to evolve over the years as the science and research and evolution of this living, breathing protocol. Talk to me a little bit about one of the elements of Protocol 41 is a separation from means. Tell me what that is.
So thanks, Meredith. So yeah, the separation of the means, it is a PAI panel for the call taker. And basically it guides them through separating the caller when they have the imminent threat or the intending suicide threat from that means of suicide. It could be getting them to walk away from the ledge of a bridge or the ledge of a building. It could be talking them or convincing them, working with them to put the pills down, to put the gun down into a safe location and moving away from that location. And a lot of times when we were talking about that, a lot of times the people are like, well, you have, after we get them to put the gun or the pills or whatever, the means of suicide into a safe location, we're asking them to take like 20 steps away from it. Right? Or go into another room. And everybody's like, why do you say 20 steps or what's that? It's not physically, we could tell them 120 steps. Right. It's actually changing their mind thought to, okay, what am I doing now? Right. Focus on something else. And to then we get them to sit down, right? We want them, while we're talking to them, we'll get them to sit down or put their phone on speaker and make sure their hands are empty. We don't want a bad outcome. So you know what? Let's get them sitting down. Let's get them relaxed. Let's get them away from the means of suicide and their phone on speaker so we can continue to communicate with them. But their hands are free of anything that for the responders can obviously see their hands are empty when they arrive.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the most revolutionary things that we've probably got available in our systems, right? To be able to help control the safety of everyone involved in these types of calls.
Right. And if I can jump in too, part of what's really groundbreaking about this with all the work folks did on it is that historically, every dispatcher, not even every comm center, is approaching how to separate a caller from the means in their own way based on what? Based on whatever they figured out on
just
their
experience,
own, but not based on what we know is most effective. So now we have a uniformly designed process, an implemented process of separation from the means, which is designed to increase the likelihood that everyone will be safe. It's not only about the safety of the caller, it's about the field responders and all those on scene as well.
Okay. And with that being said, also with that emotional control tool or the management tool of that caller, if that person says, I'm not sure I want to do that, you have tools and helpful hints within that control tool to help you or work with them and get them to put it down or move away from it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to add one more thing here. I'm going to be really honest with your listeners. The title changed in the 911 Training Institute model from mental states menu to the emotional control tool. And I cringed, but guess what? Think of it this way. It's not the call taker controlling the emotions of the caller.
No.
It's empowering the caller to take control of their own emotions. Emotional control tool is us assisting them to take control. Just to be really clear about that.
Yeah. And
right.
That's a powerful difference, right? That's a powerful distinction. So.
Oh, yes.
Jim, let's talk a little bit about why a comm center should implement and use Protocol 41. I mean, I think there's probably some glaringly obvious reasons, but I really want to hear from you. What are the most important?
Well, it begins with respecting the exhaustion of the frontline trainees and centers where they might not have had a good experience with protocols in the past. They may have never used protocols and now they're going to a radical adoption of protocols. And it can feel like too much. The Spanish would say demasiado. And it's like now we're being made into quote unquote robots. I mean, how many times have trainers of protocols heard that you're going to make us into robots? And here's the thing though. When we think about the ethics, and I won't get too personal. Let's just say I know the loss of a child, okay, and many of our dispatchers do. It's just really absolutely unfair for a telecommunicator to hear agonal breathing from an infant on the phone, having not been able to employ the best means to help save that life. The
Right.
child may perish, but what we know is when we have a sense that we did all we possibly could,
Yeah.
the impact for the telecommunicator, not only in the day, but in their lifetime cumulatively, is very different than when they can say, this job at times sucks, but I got to be there and do the best we could for this person or this child. And I know I did my best. I'm going to sleep tonight. Or maybe not tonight so well, but tomorrow night I will, or tomorrow morning. Because why? I was equipped and prepared. That's the ethical imperative. It's no different, and this is what our leaders need to know. And I just respect so much that if you're pushing back on adoption of the protocol, like one more thing, I just respect the fatigue. Maybe it's we could call it the implementation fatigue that
Sure.
you've experienced. Fair enough, but think about this: for your dispatchers to have someone complete a suicide on phone and feel like they couldn't do all they could possibly have done is just not right, and it's not right for the callers. What we know is if this protocol were designed such that you don't have any human flexibility, you can't engage with the caller freely, relate to their mental state, show acknowledgement of their feelings, affirmation of the efforts they're taking, assurance that you're present there with them, which is what is built into the EMHD model and this protocol. Well, then I wouldn't be for it. I would say, yeah, it's not healthy for the caller or the dispatcher. However, the way this is designed is to honor the suffering of the person and empower a telecommunicator to know they did the best when they get done, to be able to know we had the very best tools, the very best training, and therefore I can't save everybody, but I sure can feel good about doing all I can with every caller.
Absolutely. One of my most favorite parts of the training when I completed it was that whole theme and concept of being human on the phone with the other human. I mean, it's so important and it needs to be said. And yeah, it's so poignant. So, all right. So, in closing, I would just like to ask, I'm going to start with you, Darren. What would be the main takeaway that you would love for our listeners to take away from this episode about Protocol 41 and the emergency mental health dispatch training?
So, my main takeaway, and that's kind of a tough one because mental health dispatching is such a crucial part, right? This caller in crisis, dealing with them. I guess for the listeners to the podcast, if they're not familiar with Protocol 41 or the caller in crisis protocol, so please do your investigation, find out about it, read about it, see how it would work in your center, and try to get involved in getting everything implemented so we can work with these callers better.
Yeah, reach out to us for more support on that. Absolutely. Jim, takeaways for our listeners who are hopefully, leaders in the comm centers, dispatchers, anyone related to public safety communications.
Yeah, let's look at Protocol 41, caller in crisis, and emergency mental health dispatching as part of an essential evolution from where we have been as a 911 profession. Individually, personally in our lives, Meridith, you referenced your own loved ones, and I've had loved ones as well as I've experienced traumatic stress myself. We need to and are evolving from ambivalence and don't we talk about these, don't we deal with these things, and the fear of dealing with them ourselves in our own lives, to recognizing not only is it okay to not be okay, but we have tools and resources to be able to be really powerful in helping those who are feeling helpless in their struggles. So I'm just encouraged that this is a new day for now professionals to feel empowered. And as they're serving the callers and keeping their field responders more safe using the tools, they're going to be reinforcing in their own lives the importance of caring for their own well-being. So it's a win all the way around. And I just want to express huge gratitude to Dr. Clausen, to Darren, to the whole team for making all of this possible by their investment with us in creation of all these resources. So thank you, Meridith, and for your work as well.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for going through this very critical protocol with us and this groundbreaking development with training for emergency mental health dispatching. I hope you'll join us again someday and talk more about it. We'll have to maybe come back in a few months and see how it's been going, how the implementation of this at agencies all around the world have been going. What do you think?
I'm in.
All right.
Darren, you better say yes.
All right. Any last final words?
Just take care of yourselves out there, leaders and frontliners, as you're caring for everybody else. Please invest and take care of yourself.
Oh, I think that's the best line to end with. So thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to let us know what you liked and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Look for @TellMeExactly to get the latest on all things emergency communications. Tell Me Exactly is a Priority Dispatch Corporation podcast developed by our team of protocol experts and hosted by me, Meridith Jensen, with Cody Ekman as producer, Reading Roberts as sound engineer, Scott Robinson and Jason Barber as executive producers.